All right. So welcome to our June quarterly grantee meeting. We appreciate you all taking time out of your Thursday to be with us. And we'll kick off with our traditional disclaimer. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number ED ESE 15A 0015/0006 with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, company, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. And then I'm going to let Tanya take it away with introductions.
Hello, everybody. Again, this is Tanya, your program officer. Angela Hernandez Marshall is not going to be able to be with us today. I think Lisa is here. Lisa, are you here with us today? Maybe not.
Don't think Lisa's on just yet.
Okay, so she'll join us later. And then we have our new supervisory group leader. Her name is Donna Sabis Burns, and we are so happy that she is with our majorly big OIE team. There's a little sarcasm there. But we are so happy that she is with us, and I'll let her say a few things about herself.
Great. Small but mighty is the term, Tanya. It's small but mighty, right? Yes, Donna Sabis Burns here. I am Tuscarora Mohawk of the Iroquois Six Nations. And believe it or not, I used to work with OIE in the different capacity with the demonstration grant MPD 10 years ago or so. And it's kind of interesting how everything circles back around. And now I am back, and I never thought I would be back, and it's a great thing. I currently am I'm going to say stuck in Hawaii until the COVID relaxes somewhat, and then I will be making the move to DC. So in the meantime, I'm okay with teleworking. And I'm really excited to see the progress that's going on with these projects, and it solidifies and to see how the grants are falling and just doing the good things for Indian children and Indian country in itself. So I really appreciate all your hard work. And thank you, Synergy, as well, for making me feel so welcome. Thank you.
There's somebody outside.
All right. Now turn the presentation back on. I wanted you to actually be able to see Donna.
That picture is definitely, like I say, pre-COVID, so that looks better. So.
None of us are using our COVID pictures online. None of us have had haircuts, nothing. And then over to our Synergy team, and I'll let Kathleen kick off.
Hi, everybody. I think I've met most of you, at least online. I'm Kathleen Bethke, and I'm the project director for this technical assistance project. And I just welcome you today. I'm glad to see everybody's doing well.
Thanks, Kathleen. And I know all of you, so I won't take up time with my introductions, but we also are joined today by Miranda and Sarah from the Synergy team as well. So as we launch into our topics for today, we're going to talk a little bit about upcoming and current OIE grant competitions, some COVID-19 guidance, some continued information there. We're going to talk a little bit about the performance reports that all of you worked so hard and turned in May, and then a little bit of fiscal information to wrap up the day. So if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to pop those in the chat box or unmute and ask, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end as well. I'm going to let Tanya go ahead and take it away, talking about the OIE grant competitions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So in our discretionary program, we have the STEP notice inviting applications, and it was published on June 1st. and it's due July 31st. And there's a link that you may go to see the application. They will be conducting 2 webinars, and it'll also be recorded. So if you're interested in applying for this grant, I suggest that you go to the links provided and, you know, apply.
Actually, they just finished the webinar. So if you're looking for a live webinar, they happened, yesterday was the second one. So the contractor should be putting out a link for the recorded version. I just don't have that right at the moment, but it's coming. Just to let
And actually, if you go to that first link on the slide, and also I've put it over in the chat box, that's where the first webinar was posted. So I'm guessing that's probably the spot where they'll post the second one when it's ready.
Yeah.
And I've got that over in the chat box for anybody who'd like it.
Perfect.
Can I just ask, is Sarah, is this the one that you and I were speaking about the other day during our call? Okay, all right.
So how do I know when the NAL NIA is released? You can go to the Federal Register. And again, we've provided the links here for you to go to. You could visit the OIE program pages.
And then you can also go to the link indianeducation.ed.gov and ask to be added to the listserv. And then you will receive those program updates and deadlines at that site. So I recommend signing up at indianeducation.ed.gov. So COVID-19 guidance, you know, it's been terrible in a lot of places and worse in most, and some rather. And I'm just so thankful that we are all here, safe and healthy, to be on this webinar. And you know, I pray for you all every day that you stay safe, because it is a travesty. You know, even in my own reservation here, it's not too good here. So I'm keeping everybody in my prayers. I just want you to know, I'm so thankful that we are all here. The Department of Ed has put out some guidance on things that, resources that you can go to. For the elementary and secondary schools, there's a list of links of resources that may be beneficial for some of the questions that you may have. Things like the CARES Act and just, you know, how to respond to different things. So if you're interested in that, you know, go to some of the links there. And then on the next page, the next slide rather, we have the higher education institutions, questions regarding the questions you may have about that. You know, they're providing a lot of links, a lot of information for various things. So, you know, I would just encourage you to just look through them, and you might find something that, you know, you may have questions about. Federal student aid, things regarding college students and what they need. And then the next slide here, at-home activities. Now the links they provide here are not necessarily endorsed by the Department of Ed. They just put it out there for people in case, you know, they may want to go to or try some of these things. So it's outside departments that are forwarding the information to the Department of Ed, and they're just sharing the resources. So I just want you to know that too. Okay, so just visit the Department of Ed's website, www.ed.gov/coronavirus, for more information and resources.
All right, and then as we transition over,
Go ahead.
no, I was just saying, as we transition over to talking about annual performance reports, Tanya has received everyone's reports and is currently reviewing them. So that's kind of an in-process piece. But we did want to share with you some information just so you can kind of get an idea, particularly as the cohort 1 grantees are wrapping up their 3rd year and kind of looking at the various things that have occurred across that 3-year span. So we're going to take a look at the GEPRA measures that I know you are all super familiar with. But in particular, we're going to look at what does the reporting look like across 3 years with the GEPRA measures and with the various grantees. So let's look at GEPRA 1, remembering that that is the GEPRA that talks about language proficiency. And with proficiency being whatever you as a grantee team have determined you're going to use as your measurement of proficiency. And so you can see the information here is broken down by grantee. Remember that Albuquerque just has the baseline year 1 and year 2. And you'll notice that sometimes, like when we see in Albuquerque, they don't have the Brown for year 2 in there. Well, the reason for that is because, like with many of you, because of things with the closure and just the normal flow of the school year, this year's data might not have been available for every measure. So you're kind of able to see how that goes across. If it says something like 0%, so like with Anchorage's program, they didn't have a program in place prior to the start of their grant. So of course, if there's no program, no students are meeting proficiency in that. So you'll notice, even though there's not a bar, since there's a 0%, that means something was reported, information was reported, but that was the information. And so you can kind of see across the board what that looks like. And remember, if you have questions as we go along, just let me know. As we're looking at GEPRA 2, so GEPRA 2 being language progress. So the amount of students that are making progress from year to year in their language learning. And again, that's going to be dependent upon however you've chosen to measure that. And that means both whatever tool you're using to measure that and whatever you're considering progress year to year. And same thing here, where if there's a percentage listed, that means information was reported. If there's no percentage listed, it's because that information has not been reported yet. And so you can kind of see how that progresses year to year. And keeping in mind that with most of the programs, you're often looking at a different set of students year to year, because you may have students who are aging out of your program, or for many of you, you are adding years of program, so actually your sample size is getting much larger. So kind of expecting to see some differences there year to year. Then with GEPRA 3, looking at academic progress. Now, all of you have decided to measure English reading progress. So that's something that, despite there being the ability to kind of pick how you're going to measure academic progress, all of you have actually ended up selecting English reading as what you're measuring there. However, all of you are, of course, using different tools. Most of you are using whatever the schools use for their benchmarking, their academic benchmarking. But of course, all of your schools often are using different products for that. But just to kind of at least see that you are measuring a similar thing, just with different assessments. So very similar to the language piece. And again, you can see,
Can I ask a question about the academic progress?
Yeah.
Does it take into account that in the San Carlos community, the students on average perform at like a 10% progress? and the students that are in our program are performing at a 30% progress, which is like incredibly outstanding. Even though our scores are low, they're so much better than the rest of the population.
Yeah.
Is that taken into account?
Yes and no. And it actually brings up
similar baselines where there's the students in the regular ed program. I mean, our school district, the scores are so unbelievably low.
Yeah. Well, no, and that brings up a really good point. So I'm glad you asked that. So when you see this data, and this is why we always talk about that narrative, because this is exactly what's reported. So as you can see, it doesn't give you that background info of, okay, here are where our kids are performing. And you may or may not think that that looks great in just this very black and white data. But when you know the larger context of how all of the students in the district who are not getting to participate in this amazing program are doing, then all of a sudden that black and white data looks a lot more nuanced, and you can see that there is a lot more progress. So that's why it's so vital that when you're doing your annual performance reports, that you make sure and include that background and that context in that area, because this is just the information straight from that top part where you put in just, you know, the ratio and the percentage that results. So it doesn't give, you know, a lot of big picture. So that's why that narrative is so important. And I know that y'all usually do a good job of in your narrative really explaining that piece, but that really highlights why that's so important, because without that, this is all people are seeing. With that, this looks even better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I was just wondering if, like, do the other schools or the other communities that are participating in this grant, are your test scores typically as low as the ones that we find in our community, which are, you know, drastically lower than the state and national averages?
Yeah, well, and we can actually, if y'all want, I'll stop share so it's a little easier to do. But if you look at the bottom of your screen at that participant button, that brings up the list of everybody on the call, and an easy way to kind of give feedback on this. At the bottom of that list of names, you'll see a yes and a no button. If your student's academic performance is about the same approximately as the students who are not in your language program, then go ahead and hit yes, that yes, they're about the same. If the students in your language program tend to perform better on their academic achievements, hit no, for no, it is not the same as the rest of the student population. And we'll do a quick poll to kind of get that feedback. And if you're not able to find the yes, no's, you're welcome to put it in the chat box. But it looks like right now, at least, out of the 5 grantees, 3 have answered, 2 of which are saying that their academic scores are about the same, and then 1 indicating that their academic scores tend to be a good deal higher or somewhat higher. So there we go.
Okay, I was just wondering, because it makes a huge difference. I mean, it's the same with our attendance. It's the same with everything else across the board, is that our data looks low, but it's so much higher than the rest of the population.
Yeah. And I think you'll also start seeing some differences depending upon the student groups that are being served, because typically, you know, a lot of research shows that students who are in that immersion learning environment may see some lower performance, particularly in English language arts in those first few years. But then after about 3rd grade, all of a sudden you see their scores just jettison up, and they're going to be outperforming their peers. So those who are solely working with younger students right now and kind of building their program may not be seeing those huge performance differences, but as their program builds and they're able to hit that kind of 3rd grade mark where we typically see that leap, you may see even bigger differences. So yeah, all great things, but that's why it's so important to put that stuff in the narrative, so that it is really clear that it's not as black and white as the data may make it seem. All right, so let's jump back in. All right, so that was our academic progress data. So we'll go over to GEPRA 4, which is our attendance data. And as we look at the attendance data, same thing, percentages are information, and then not all the schools had that available just yet. And keeping in mind that, again, with the school closure this year, a lot of you saw a different reporting period than normal. For a lot of you, attendance, as far as formal attendance, stopped in March. So it kind of changed how things were going to be measured for you this year. But this is looking at the difference between the attendance of the students in your program and your comparison group. And I'll tell you, the vast majority of you are using as your comparison group the non-participating students from your school district. So most of you are using a very similar comparison group across the board. And also keeping in mind that some of you may be seeing some incremental increases, but that we can't do decimals here. And so if it doesn't reach at least a 0.5, then it gets reported as 0, where again, it's really important to start including that information in the narrative. And I know many of your schools and organizations have also been working on other attendance initiatives that can also impact, because if you're already working on getting all of the students to start attending school more, then you may not see as large a leap as you were expecting. Then just in general, all of you have different other project measures, anything from expanding grade levels to increasing the number of students being served by your program, measures of social and emotional learning. Most of you have curriculum development. 4 out of the 5 of you included some form of curriculum development. 4 out of the 5 of you had some form of work on assessment, whether it was creating a brand new assessment or modifying your existing one. Many of you had things in there regarding staffing and getting more staff and providing more and better professional development for your staff. And then many of you also had things around providing cultural events and activities. So as we kind of think overall, just to give a couple of particular highlights for every grantee, with Albuquerque, they have seen a significant increase in the number of cultural activities provided for students and that students are actually participating in. They are fully staffed, so they have all 3 of their staff members and are able to be offering classes at 9 schools to 100 students this last year. So they're kind of in full implementation mode now. With Anchorage, they've completed their curriculum that they were building through 2nd grade and then continuing to work past that. And then we'll be launching their 2nd grade come this fall to join their kinder and 1st grade classes. Le Coudray has made significant progress on their new middle school curriculum and expect to be wrapping that up quite soon, and have added 8th grade so that now they can have from kinder through 8th grade. With San Carlos, they've completed the initial curriculum for Head Start, kindergarten, and 1st, and are also continuing to build up from there, with 2nd grade launching this coming fall as well. And then for Yukon-Koyukuk, they've completed their 2 language workbooks. So they've got both of those consumable workbooks and teacher materials ready, and have conducted 24 book slams where they were creating those online digital books in language. So you can see across the board, lots and lots and lots of work occurring over the last 3 years. And then, all of you in your APR discussed some challenges that have been encountered, whether it be specifically this year or across your 3-year grant span. And we saw kind of some themes emerge as we look at challenges across grantees. I think one of the biggest ones tend to be being able to find and secure consistent qualified staffing, and then the amount of time that your staff have available for all the different projects that are part of your grant and just part of your program. The creation of curriculum and learning resources and just the time and resources that takes. Having appropriate assessments that actually measure what you want, they're age and student appropriate, and then also having the staffing necessary to then implement the assessments in the way that you'd like. There were also a number of challenges around our student populations being more mobile or transient, and so being able to keep students for the duration of time needed for language learning and progress. Leadership changes within our programs. I think a lot of us have encountered fiscal hurdles. So whether that be, working with new fiscal staff or getting things, whether it be communication or procedures in place just to make budgeting and drawdowns and purchases flow easier. Partnerships, whether it be securing them, continuing them, modifications that had to be made in them throughout this grant project. And then also project scope, the challenges around sometimes what we thought we could accomplish with our dreamy eyes when we were writing the grant versus what's actually been achievable within a pretty tight time span of 3 years. So those are just kind of some of the threads that we saw, and I think are also really beneficial for those of you who are thinking about sustainability and other grant applications. So that leads us kind of nicely into our fiscal updates and reminders. So as is typical at our quarterly grantee meetings, just giving you a look at the updated drawdown information. This information Tanya pulled yesterday. So it should, unless somebody did a drawdown literally this morning, then this should be your most up-to-date information. So the percentage that you see at the top of your bar is what percentage of your grant you have expended to date. When you look at the colors on your bar, the brown monies are the monies that you have actually drawn down through G5, and the orange are the monies that you have yet to draw down. So if we were looking at in an ideal world, if everything was always drawn down equally each month, our cohort 1 grantees would be at about 90% expended, and Albuquerque would be at about 85% expended. Now we know with school closure as well as the summer, sometimes that kind of causes some changes in expenditures, but just really keeping an eye on that, particularly over the summer as we head into the new school year, so that you can be thinking about for our cohort 1s, that September 30 grant end date, and for Albuquerque, the end of the grant year, and then moving into carryover in year 3. So just something to keep an eye on. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to talk to you a bit more about some fiscal reminders. Oh, Tanya, if you're talking, you may be muted.
Yep, I was unmuted. I mean, I'm unmuted now.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yes. All right. So, so if you have any budget transfers that you are thinking about making, and you have questions about, just shoot us an email and we can discuss it with you. We just ask that you keep us informed about what you're doing with your money. Don't be afraid to ask questions ever, because I get to you, and we'll get your issues resolved. And especially if something is allowable or not allowable. Changes must be within the goals and objectives of what your grant was originally approved for. So you can't, change what you said you were going to do. You have to stick to the goals that you said you wanted to accomplish. And just send us any updated budgets when you do make your transfer, so that we can keep your file updated and be on track. NoCost extensions. So what is allowable and unallowable? So if your sole purpose for using your funds is unobligated funds, then that is not something that would be approved. Just because, you know, you have money left over and you're like, well, you know, I don't have anything else that I want to do with it, I'm just going to ask for a no-cost extension and figure something out. No, that would not be approved. Changes to the approved objectives and the scope of the grant, that cannot happen. You cannot change that or add anything to that that wasn't originally approved. Any new activities that you think you may want to do, if it wasn't already listed in your application, you cannot add anything new. Now, things that are allowable, additional time for the completion of your previously approved grant activities. You know, you may have had something that you were working on prior to COVID, and then it came to a halt, and you still, you know, want to continue working on that to finish it up, finish your goal for that, then that's allowable. You do have up to 12 months in one grant. The demonstration grant that I also had grantees in, I had one entity that originally asked for 6 months. Well, then after COVID happened and they couldn't complete their goals, they asked for a second extension, which actually was 6 months more. So they actually had up to 12 months. And so because they had previously only had 6 months, they could ask for the remainder of the 6 months, and that was allowable. You know, if you think you only need 6 months, then, you know, you can ask for 6 months. It's just, you know, what your plans are and how long you think you'll need to complete your grant activities. Okay, so the initial approximate no-cost extension request, when you submitted your May APR, if you thought you might have be asking for a no-cost extension, then I'll be contacting you for an updated final no-cost extension request. You will need to resubmit, or actually not but you need to submit a more specific request detailing the activities that you want to complete, and also an updated revised budget regarding that. The application is due September 18th. You have, I love that. You have a couple of months here to get everything together. But in the meantime, you know, you still have your grant monies now. Continue your activities. Don't stop doing, you know, what you're doing with your grantees, with your program, because you think you may want to ask for a no-cost extension. Because, you know, it's not guaranteed. I mean, you have to really show that what you're asking for is allowable. So do spend your money. Don't wait until September to say, oh, I have this, I just want to continue on. And, you know, we want you to spend your money, because I am checking it every month. So please make sure you're spending your money down.
Tanya, just to piggyback off of that, and when you do a no-cost extension, it's very important to be very clear to make sure your budget matches your planned activities in that request, because you don't want it to say, hey, because a lot of you have COVID monies that probably weren't spent due to the COVID. So we understand, but the onus is on you to show your budget and making sure it aligns properly And because like Tanya said, we do large balance reports, large available balance reports from G5, and it's flagged, and we have to be able to justify. And if you're not giving us the information to justify it properly, then we can't do that on your behalf either. So just very important with those no cost extensions to be is aligning their budget and money and with activities as best you can. That's all.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, and here is a copy of the optional budget form. I think y'all are familiar with it. And it really is detailed, and you can actually go in and personalize it and get very detailed as to where you're spending your money.
So this is an option that you can use.
And Tanya, I'm actually popping that over in the chat box for everybody, and then I'll also email it out after the webinar today.
Okay, great.
Okay, and so we have some questions here about feedback. Oh, once the APRs are completely reviewed,
As I stated earlier, if you indicated that you may be requesting a no-cost extension, then I will be reaching out to you. And as far as approval, due to our current being, but no-cost extensions are not just given out automatically. You must demonstrate that you are completing your projects or need to complete your project, and that you need the extra time to do that. You cannot change the approved objectives and scope of the grant, and you cannot propose new activities in the no-cost extension. The FPR, the final program report, if you're awarded or approved for a no-cost extension, your report will be due 90 days after the end of your approved no-cost extension.
All right. So now if anybody has any other questions about the topics that we've talked about today, or any questions for Tanya and Donna in general, feel free to unmute and ask those, or pop them in the chat box.
If we are not requesting a no-cost extension, when is the final due date for the final report?
December 15th, 2020.
your final, yes, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, we'll stay on in case anybody thinks of any other questions, but we'll go to our final poll for the day, and it should pop up magically on your screen. Was this webinar beneficial for you and or your program? And you'll be able to answer right there in the poll, quick yes or no. And then if you have any other questions, we'll take those. And also a reminder that we do have next Thursday our next group coaching session. We had a great turnout last week, 15 folks. If there's anybody on your team that you think would be interested in attending those, that you're not sure if they're getting the invites, just let me know. I just need their email address and I can get them that information, because it is open to everyone on your team. It's not a top secret group coaching session. And next week's session is going to focus on recording videos, whether it be of your screen, of you, of just audio, lots of different tools, techniques, and options for doing videos for your class. All right, I'm going to unshare so we can see each other. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to stay on. We'll stay on with you for a few more minutes. But otherwise, we are at the end of our time together today. We appreciate you taking time to attend the June quarterly grantee meeting. And we'll see most of you next Thursday for our group coaching session. Have a great Thursday.